very good. All right, I think everyone that's coming is here, so why don't we open the meeting with the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, welcome all. I see the first item on our agenda is public comment, and I see a member from the public. If do you have anything for us this evening? Or?
No, I'm
okay.
waiting for another agenda.
All right, very good. Approval of the minutes from January. We've missed a couple meetings, so we're having to reach back a ways. So do I have a motion to approve? Or have you had a chance to?
Motion approved.
All right. A second?
Sure, I can second. I don't know, I wasn't here.
All right, we'll approve the January minutes. Chief, I see you're down for introduction of the new member. Would you like to do that introduction? Or?
Sure, I can do that. I met Carol Collins yesterday. We had a really good meeting. She's a long-term, 40-plus year resident of Atherton, currently lives in Lindenwood. Married, has 3 kids, one out of college, one in college, one in high school. And she has an undergrad and a master's degree from Stanford University. So a lot of local knowledge of the town. We had a great conversation. I think she's going to be a great addition to the community. And we want to thank her for stepping up. It's no easy task, as you both know. And thank you, Carol. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Look
thank you
forward to
and welcome. We look forward to working with you. Set confirmed meeting schedule for the next year. We've met on odd numbered months, second Tuesday of the month. So unless there's any suggestion to changing that scheme, I think we'll stay with that. It's 6 o'clock. I think that's mutually inconvenient for everyone. So it means it's probably pretty good. Chief, do you or any staff have any input on that schedule? Or?
No, we're available to you. So.
All right. Well, let's just plan on adhering to that schedule, and rather than try to select the dates right now, we'll just odd numbered months, second Tuesday of the month at 6 o'clock.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Appointment of chair, vice chair. It's that time of year, so I will open the floor to any nominations.
I nominate you as the chair and Gary as the vice chair if you're acceptable to it.
I would be happy to continue. Are there any other nominations?
Sounds perfect.
All right.
I'm happy to as well.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We'll stay with that same lineup then. Walsh Road, no stopping ahead signs. Chief?
Yes, thank you. This has been on the agenda for a little while. I forget the gentleman's name who lives on Walsh Road, just west of the Alameda. And as you go just west of on the Walsh Road from Alameda, there's already two stopping signs on the north side. He's requested 2 additional signs due to not so much construction traffic, but due to school-related traffic with staff parking and students dropping off kids. I don't think it's just construction related, it will continue. And I believe Robert has been in the area, I've been in the area a couple of times, as the sergeant has. It isn't an area where cars should be stopping and dropping off pedestrians, and so I agree with him and support the installation of 2 of those additional signs.
All right. Could you just outline the process that you'll go through?
For sign installation?
For sign installation, do you have to issue a warrant of some sort?
No, what it is, I think our neighborhood traffic program allows for the transportation committee to approve certain signage. And so the request came in to staff and to the chief to take a look at it, but it's something that we'll bring forward to the transportation committee before we move forward with any sort of installation of the signage. So,
I'm not really understanding anything here.
Perhaps if we move the mic down from the podium,
there was another mic.
Gary, are you hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'll repeat that. So the request came in to staff, I believe it came to the chief to take a look at installing those signs. And prior to us proceeding with that installation, our neighborhood traffic program has us bring the request to the transportation committee for consideration, and after their approval, we have a limited budget that allows for some sign installations, and this would be covered under that.
And we do have, it went out to you originally, but like I said, it's been a while. We do have the original letter and schematics in the resident explaining the background. He and I have spoken on the phone at least 3 times.
All right, and you recommend placing the sign?
Yes.
Is that, it's been long enough. And with our new member, I'm wondering if we could circulate. Is there any urgency or?
No, other than his request came in back in September, and I know he's been a bit frustrated, but certainly there's not going to be any issue if we don't install the signs now. I just know that he's been very, very patient.
Yeah, I'd be reluctant to even call for a vote for it right now. It's not, to be honest, it's not fresh in my memory, and with a new member, if we could recirculate the schematic, the letter that outlines the issue, and we'll put it on the agenda for next.
I'll craft an email and get it out to all of you.
Okay, and if you could inform him, and please extend,
He understands. He has a good attitude.
our apologies.
A quick question. Are we talking about the Walsh Road no stopping ahead signs,
Yes.
and the Watkins Avenue left turns, etc.?
Well, right now we're just talking about the no stopping ahead sign.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen a memo on that.
All right. Well, Chief McCauley will circulate it. I'll have a chance to study it before the next meeting, and then we'll be set to act on it next meeting. All right. Next item: Watkins Avenue left turn. Further restrict the left turn times, Chief.
Anthony, I'm not sure where that came from. My apologies, I'm not sure where that originated. I want to say it was internal to the city. Concerned about extending the times of the current restrictions, which are now from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. I believe somebody, I don't recall, wanted it extended. I'm not aware of any concerns there other than utilizing it myself quite often. Knowing the restrictions, I just go to Fair Oaks to the signal where it's safer and make my turns.
So, are you sure this is referring to left on El Camino versus the left across Middlefield? Is that what it said? What is the issue here, I guess?
Yeah, it would have been a left turn from Watkins on El Camino, because that's where the restriction is now from 4 to 6, Monday through Friday.
Okay. Well, the reason I raised it is somebody at the last meeting talked about a left on Middlefield from Watkins as an issue they wanted to put on the agenda in the future.
Are you aware of any particular problems at that location?
Now that I've got clarification that it's not the existing, it's the current.
It's the current.
All right.
Can I ask a question about this?
Please do, Gary.
So, since we're talking about the issue of turning left from Watkins onto Middlefield, correct?
On to El Camino.
Oh, okay, onto El Camino, and so the problem, I presume, is that there people are wait there for too long, blocking people who might want to turn right while they are trying to turn left. Correct?
Right.
Would it be possible to shave off a little bit of the to basically create a right turn lane to such in order to separate out a right and left turn to to facilitate that, because that, anyway, we've had the same issue in multiple locations, and typically there is enough room. It's just a matter of choosing to do it. And restricting turns is one way, but letting people get around those people is another.
Yeah,
I think we've looked into this as history. We've looked into this before, I believe. There is, at the corner of Watkins and El Camino, there is more publicly owned land on the side of that intersection than in most places. And I know at one point the city was looking into whether there was room to put in another right lane there. I don't know how that worked out.
I've not heard of that one, sir.
I think as a general rule, that is a better solution where it's available.
well, I'm not sure. Do we know the origin of this
I
agenda
don't.
item?
I'll have to research. I don't know if they have a particular collision problem there because of this. I do know why the time restrictions are there, because that time of day, particularly trying to turn left, is almost impossible and unsafe. And that's why we recommend that people go down the Fair Oaks and use the signal.
Could I suggest this, that perhaps that be examined and Gary's suggestion be considered?
Well, I think the way that would happen is that the recommendation of the Transportation Committee would go to council to direct staff.
So we look at it?
Hmm?
So we look at it?
Yeah.
All right, we'll suggest that then to the council then.
And his recommendation again was,
Gary, could you repeat your suggestion?
Well, my suggestion for this specifically and this problem generally is where there is sufficient land or sufficient road to designate a separate left turn lane from right turn, then that enables the people who are waiting to turn left not to block people who wish to turn right. And it's just a matter of trying to, sometimes it's putting down a little more asphalt on land that we own or have the right of way or the right to put it there, or sometimes it's a matter of just repainting lines on the road, as was the case at the intersection of Atherton Avenue and El Camino Real, and the intersection of the opposite of Atherton Avenue, the other side of El Camino Real. Fair Oaks, right. In both cases, there was a problem that left turners were blocking right turners, but by repainting on the road, that problem was reduced. Not eliminated, but reduced.
Okay, so
Because if enough people are backed up to turn left, that can block access to the right lane, but that's a minority of the time.
okay, so the one additional comment that I would make is that El Camino is a state highway, and so any modifications at that intersection would also require some approval by them. And so if it's the committee's desire to move it forward towards to the council, we can work with the chief to put that on their agenda, and we will provide kind of a schematic of where the property lines are just for reference.
I think you did a similar analysis there at Atherton and El Camino last year. And the determination was there wasn't enough
I
Yeah.
believe the concerns would be here the same thing. I
room to
don't
do
believe there's
anything.
room to do that.
I think if you look,
We'll take a look.
we've looked, I think
We'll-
if you
we'll have
look,
to
you'll
take a look,
find that,
yeah.
that at least we've got enough room to have a conversation, and we have there's other issues that come up, but if you look at that site, you can actually see where the proposed right of way is, and it's much more than 3 feet. It's a lot.
Okay. Wait, is there an interest
Yes.
by the committee?
Yes.
All right, we'll make that recommendation to the council that they authorize Public Works to take a look at that and see what can be done. Is there enough property there to even consider doing anything, dividing the lanes?
I will track back to see where there is some question to extend the time restriction.
All right, thank you. All right, item F, installation of additional no parking signs, Elena and Valparaiso.
So for tonight's meeting, I'm actually gonna pull this topic, there's some other stuff that's come up with this, and I'm trying to get a little more background information and make contact with a few people. So if I can get everything done, we'll put it back on the agenda for the next transportation committee meeting.
All right. Was this a result, just out of curiosity, of a citizen's complaint, or?
No, this has come up through the police department because of some issues we had with parking at Sacred Heart School, with construction at Sacred Heart School, and with their students parking in the, on northbound Molina between Valparaiso and Park. And the problem is the current signage on that street is not adequate to properly enforce the no parking and or no stopping signs. So I want to do a little more research before I bring it forward.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, next one, installation of signs. Expect heavy traffic on Encinal Avenue during school dismissal times.
So this is mine. As you know, there's a traffic congestion problem in front of Encinal School on Encinal Avenue every day during the pickup times. Eastbound Encinal Avenue becomes stopped with vehicles waiting to turn left into the Encinal School parking lot. And vehicles wanting to make this left-hand turn cannot, because there's also vehicles wanting to make a right-hand turn from westbound Encinal into the same parking lot. And they end up choking each other off in the parking lot. As a result of this, cars come to a complete stop on eastbound Encinal Avenue just prior to the entrance to the parking lot. And what it's doing is it's causing other eastbound cars to go around them in the bike lane and pass them up, or it's causing eastbound cars to cross over the double yellow lines, drive on the wrong side of the road, past all the cars up, and then get back in the eastbound lane. What the police department is concerned about, as well as the school, is a head-on collision in front of the school, a bicyclist being hit, a pedestrian being hit, somebody suffering a major injury or death because of the driving actions of the people who get stuck in this traffic and don't want to wait. We have spoken with the school. The congestion lasts for about 20 minutes at each pickup time in the afternoons. And we've spoken with the school administration, and they would like to help us solve this problem. And they're going to do some things this year to try by staggering their pickup times. They're going to try to do a better job with traffic and flow control in their parking lot using their staff. And they're going to encourage carpooling, walking, and bicycle riding. What they've asked us to do is to install some signs on Encinal Avenue and on Middlefield Road that say expect heavy traffic ahead, with some wording or some times that people know the traffic's going to be heavy and maybe to take an alternate route to their destination. What they would like to see is a sign on northbound Middlefield before Encinal, a sign on southbound Middlefield before Encinal, and a sign on eastbound Encinal before the school. They'd like to try that and see if it kind of reduces the amount of cars that go down Encinal during their school pickup times, to see if it can reduce the congestion on that street. Currently, traffic's congested between 2:15 p.m. and 3:15 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. School's out at 2:35 and 3, and it's congested between 1:15 and 2:05 on Thursdays, when school gets out between 1:30 and 1:50. This is the first step that we would like to take to try to help them solve the problem, and to see if it creates any difference, us with the signs and them doing a better job encouraging carpooling, doing a better job with traffic control, flow control in their parking lot. We want to see if this can help reduce the congestion that's on Encinal Avenue right now.
Open that up for discussion. Are there any school crossing signs at those locations that you mentioned that would alert approaching traffic that there's a school, that they're approaching a school?
I believe there are school signs out there, as well as the traffic light that's there at the intersection of Encinal and Middlefield with the crosswalks. And they do have a crossing guard out there in the morning and afternoon time for the kids.
So in terms of budget, how does it work? Because in my experience, I've seen that the signage, which is not permanent, but the lit up signs are usually more effective under these circumstances, because people just sort of kind of drive in a haze, and these things. So in terms of budget, how does it work, and have we considered options like that?
So what we're looking at doing is making these signs permanent with a pole and a metal sign. And then I've already talked with Encinal School, so a couple of weeks before school starts, we're actually gonna put our changeable message sign out there on Encinal Avenue and hopefully even on Middlefield Road to advise drivers that school will be starting and to expect slow traffic in the area.
And before school starts this year, I've been invited to attend a parent-teacher meeting. We're trying to educate the parents of what the issue is so they can get their assistance as well.
In observing traffic during those hours, do you see near misses, or do you see, I mean, is it a frequent, common occurrence?
Yeah, it's every day.
Where people are either diving onto the shoulder or crossing the center line?
They're coming up full speed on Encinal and they're making a right into the bike lane, or they're crossing over the double yellows to pass everybody up on the wrong side of the road.
We're looking for a solution. Safety is priority number one, but also for us, because at those times every day we get the same complaints and the same calls. We go out and try to respond. By the time we get out, then the problems are
Sure.
So we're just looking for enforcement isn't always the solution, and it isn't in this one either. So.
Are there approved signs, MUT, CD approved signs?
There are certain signs, I don't know if this one would fall directly under that. We'd have to look at the most compatible sign that would work.
I mean, it would have to be something that was
That's correct.
on the approved list, right? Please?
My only concern about the signs is they put them up at MA and then the school hours change, so they're not valid anymore. So
Yeah.
permanent signs do go out of date.
Well, I don't know that we would put the actual hours.
We might put something like during school pickup times, afternoon pickup times. We could make it very general.
Yeah.
Just two issues with you. I know the council's expressed sensitivity about signs generally in the town, so try to make sure if we're putting a sign up, there's a very good reason for it. And then, it's a good idea. My thought is most people know what's going on in Encinal during it's terrible traffic there, and you get caught in it once and you don't forget. So I don't know who the sign. I guess we few who forgot, and very few out of counters who just don't know. Would be my guess. I'm not sure how much utility is what I'm saying at the end of the day would be.
Yeah, I had a lot of the same thoughts, and I think traffic's gotten heavy enough on Middlefield that I don't know what percentage of the mix are unfamiliar with the neighborhood. That's why I asked about the school signs. You know, is there something alerting drivers that they're approaching a school zone? You know, I'd want to know that first. But Gary, do you have any comments?
What would these signs be saying?
Well, we'd like them to say something similar to expect heavy traffic or expect slow or stop traffic during school pickup times Monday through Friday, something similar to that, something we can find that's in the MUTCD that would be legal and acceptable.
Well, I'm just wondering whether that's really an important thing to convey. And one other thing about that location is that when they have large school events, a lot of people do park on the side of the road there, and one of the problems is the signs are often not set back far enough and that they would wind up being another obstacle to parking. So it doesn't sound to me like there's a very compelling need for that type of thing.
To Gary's point, personal experience, I've seen that because people park on Middlefield, and you're so focused on making sure that you're staying within your lane and not hitting people, etc. You're not paying attention to those signs. You probably will miss those signs.
What does the accident profile look like in that Encinal Middlefield corridor?
I'd have to run the stats and look at the numbers. There's not a lot of collisions there at that intersection or on Encinal Avenue. There's plenty of collisions on Middlefield Road. In fact, Middlefield Road and El Camino are two streets that get the most collisions in town, mostly caused by speed and left turn violations. But at that intersection, there's maybe been 2 or 3 in the past couple of years at the intersection itself.
Aren't you most worried about kids, pedestrians, walking around near the school? Is that a big concern? Kids are getting out of school just as...
Yeah, there is, and they're under very good control from staff and crossing guards. We luckily have not had any car child incidents or injuries. And to be clarify, I believe the intersection you're talking about is to the drive-in, not the field incident.
Correct.
To the school.
Correct, the entrance of the school is on Encinal, west of Middlefield Road.
But the signage will also be on Middlefield, right? That's what I was talking
The
about.
school would like to place a sign on both sides of Middlefield and also on Encinal Avenue.
You could, my thought is if you could do just a schematic showing, what signs are out there now, alerting drivers that there's, they're entering a school zone. And, to Carol's point, would a changeable speed sign be more effective than a fixed sign? I mean, is it the end of queue type collisions that are the concern? Traffic queues up at Encinal and Middlefield, and traffic approaching the end of the queue. Is that the
Yes,
issue?
yeah, it's the concern that, well, of course if we're in a collision, but I think the bigger concern is vehicles that are going around the stop traffic, driving on the shoulder of the road, or driving on the wrong side of the road. And especially at that intersection, if you get somebody who's not paying attention, and they drive on the wrong side of the road, somebody pulls out of the parking lot, or somebody turns off the Middlefield, you have a pretty major collision there.
Okay. Well, again, my thought would be, perhaps check the MUTCD, see what signs, would you suggest, would you recommend? And then perhaps an inventory of what's out there now. Do you have
I
any thoughts
really
on-
like the idea of putting something temporary, school starting. Don't drive in the bike lanes, I don't know.
I don't know, I'm in
Some
Gary's-
education, I'd like to try that, definitely.
I'm in Gary's campus too. I don't see much of a benefit in posting signs there because if the concern is really the people who are breaking the law, I don't think the signage is going to help them because they're doing it knowingly and willingly. And I mean, crossing the double yellow line or going on the bicycle path at those places we know is illegal. They
It's a
shouldn't
pretty
be doing
deliberate
it.
act. yeah.
Everybody knows it's illegal and they're doing it purposely.
So, that would be my recommendation, just, if you could flesh it out a little bit.
In the meantime, the next meeting will be after school starts. There's no reason they're not able to put the
Big changeable
mobile
message signs.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many of those do you have, out of curiosity?
One.
One? Would a second one be helpful, or? I know it could be challenging to get them out there and get them in
I mean,
place.
quite possibly, but with one message sign, we can only be at one place at a time with it.
All right. Next item, Los Lomitas School Driveway Updates.
That might be a likely way to comment on it.
I suspect.
So, I'm Robert Ovadia, the Public Works Director. We received an encroachment permit application from the school in June regarding the driveway locations. This follows on a public meeting that the school district had with the neighborhood when they proposed realigning their driveway with Walsh Road and installing a traffic signal. They did come to, I think it was the following Transportation Committee meeting that was to be held after the public meeting to discuss the installation of the signal. There was not a quorum at that point in time, but the school district did say that they were going to rethink their approach to access. We hadn't heard much until we got the application in June. And so at that point in time, when we met with the district to go over their proposed plan, and we suggested that they come to the Transportation Committee and invite the neighborhood to see what they were proposing to do. At that point in time, we did just ask them to take a look at an additional item, and we'll get into that, as well as some feedback that we got after the district makes their presentation. And so we have a copy of the slides with you, and we'll pull it up on the screen so that Eric Holm can go through what they're proposing. After Eric is done, we'll go into kind of some of the comments and then open it up for the public.
Okay, very
Okay.
good. Perhaps you could put the microphone back on the mic, podium, so Mr. Louder can hear.
Good evening. Thank you
you.
for having us tonight. So, it's present similar to the issues you were just discussing at Encinal. Traffic is a challenge for us at our school as well. We do have a robust busing and alternate modes of transportation. We run close to 67% of our student population at Los Alamitas that's bused, biked, or walked to school. And that's actually the highest in the county from the Safe Routes surveys that the county has done. But also similar to Encinal, waiting for our pickup time, we completely shut down some of the streets around us by cars waiting there. So on the first slide, we have just our existing campus the way it was. We're currently doing construction, building some new buildings. This is the campus before construction started. And the circulation is such that we have Alameda down at the bottom, and the side street on the right is Camino al Lago. We used to enter on Camino al Lago, and we have a pretty short queue for our drop-off on campus. And so we basically would back up the entire distance of Camino al Lago along the block, along our frontage of our school. So any residents or people passing through Camino al Lago would be stuck there for a good 15 minutes if they hit it the wrong time. There's also concerns of ours that we've had has been safety at the intersection of Camino al Lago and Alameda. We had the previous, this layout, the existing condition was that buses and cars would enter there as well as pedestrians and bikes. And they would come onto campus, and then they also would leave, the buses and cars would leave on our Alameda parking lot. We also, further to the north, had a separate driveway that had in and out egress with a smaller load there. We started this process about 4 years ago, meeting with neighbors immediately impacted on Camino al Lago and on Alameda, that basically all sort of touched the school. Walked with the San Mateo County, with Atherton Public Works, and with our transportation engineer, and did a series of studies. Looked at, ultimately our proposal was to install a traffic light at Walsh Road, and we had met, we'd done several studies for that along the lines, and one of the last things we did was to meet with all of the residents of Walsh Road. Walsh Road is kind of a atypical configuration for a side street in that there's a really heavy load of cars up there, but it's all sort of essentially dead end. So it's sort of its own isolated community up there. And up until that point, our feedback had all been positive towards the light. I think the outcome of the meeting was that the only thing we could agree on was that we didn't agree. So some people were in favor of the light, some people wanted the light at Camino al Lago, some people wanted no change, some people wanted a complete change to enter and exit on Camino al Lago. So that was when we came to you in March and said, okay, we're pausing and we're going to figure out what we can do. As I said, this is a process that has been going on 4 years, and we are in construction. So we took a step back and we said, okay, what feedback from the residents that we heard can we address and can we utilize without making major changes? Because putting in a traffic light on Alameda was going to be a major change. So this was our new plan. This was the plan that we submitted to Public Works in June, which was really an attempt to have a very minimal intervention that would still have a pretty significant impact on reducing congestion and reducing our impact in the surrounding streets. So the main thing we did is we looked at our Camino al Lago frontage, and we looked at reconfiguring the sidewalks and whatnot, and widening that there so we could actually still bring our cars in on Camino al Lago, and also have our buses in there. But we were proposing to bring our cars in on Camino al Lago and have them have a very long on-campus queue. That the drop-off is at the bottom there, where the arrow kind of takes a little jog, which is sort of right here.
Can I make a point on that issue? Your drop off is not wide enough, and in order to get better throughput, you should make it wider so multiple cars can be loading or unloading at one time.
Gary, I was going to suggest that, why don't we finish this presentation and then hear some of the public comment, and then
Okay.
we can weigh in.
Okay, thank
after
you.
hearing
Sorry.
that.
So, our drop off is essentially almost 2 full frontages of the school. By bringing in on Camino Lago, coming in, dropping on Alameda, and then our plan is to exit out at the existing curb cut on Alameda. There's also an additional curb cut to the right, or to the north of Alameda. It's an existing, formerly residential driveway. We want to utilize that same driveway to make it right turn only, which would really just help some of the throughput after the drop off to get cars out and get them down their way on Alameda. And the other thing we would like to do is we're bringing the bus in on Camino Lago and have bus drop off on this frontage only, and then exit the buses out on Camino Lago. Currently, we were exiting both cars and buses on Alameda. This would separate them. Then in doing that, formally the crosswalk is right here, is sort of an offset crosswalk right inside about 25, 50 yards in from the corner, which is not as safe because normally you expect crosswalks to be at the intersection. So working with both advice from the town and from our transportation engineer, they said, it'd be a lot better if you could actually relocate the crosswalk to the actual intersection. So we're proposing relocating the crosswalk to the intersection of Camino Lago and Atherton. And that intersection is a little funky in that it's half San Mateo County and half Atherton. So the north side of the intersection is Atherton, the south side is San Mateo County. So the last modification is that the crosswalk on the south side of Camino Lago that's in the county is the one that is the enhanced ladder crosswalk. The one on the north side in Atherton is a simple double stripe, and it doesn't have accessible curb cuts on the corners. And so we are proposing to remove the one on the south side and enhance the one on the north side, add in accessible curb cuts, curb ramps on the corners, make it a ladder crosswalk. And what that does is, one of the outcomes from our study with the transportation engineer is that the throughput on Alameda is congested from the fact that there are so many crosswalks. There's also a mid-block signalized crosswalk to the south, and that if we could reduce that breaking up of multiple people crossing at multiple junctures, that's a lot of cars that are starting and stopping. So we're trying to consolidate some of that. Also, the majority of the traffic to school comes from the south, so it's northbound direction. And so the majority of the traffic will be turning right onto Camino Lago. And that has been one of those pressure points for us, where cars are turning, the buses were turning, and the kids were walking. So this puts more kids on the north side, which reduces the number of car to student crossing interactions that occur by moving them just beyond where the cars are. So that is the proposed modifications we would like to make. Basically the sum total is a permission to turn right out of the existing driveway on the north. The slight widening of our current Camino Lago corner to allow buses to get out, because the turn radius needs to be a little larger for the bus to get out, and then relocating the crosswalk and enhancing the crosswalk, as I indicated. And we've also met with the county about this, and they say pending Atherton's approval, they're fine with the proposals.
All right, any comments before we,
Yeah, I just had
comments from the public.
a couple, and so
It's a
we'll,
process, but normally we go through questions,
okay.
and before you get the comment, just so you can have a round of questions before you can public comment, so everybody understands them.
Okay. So I'm just going to add a couple items in terms of, we received the encroachment permit application. Our review and approval authority is limited to work within the public right-of-way. The school land is covered under the Department of State Architecture, and so we really don't have much in terms of regulatory authority as we would on other pieces of property within the town. So when we looked at this, noticing the left turn out of the school, again, this is the current driveway location, but it's crossing through the left turn pocket to get onto Walsh. And so it is an additional conflict point from the Walsh intersection. And so we did ask the school district to take a look at whether or not it was possible to realign that left exit with the intersection, so that we could look at minimizing some of that conflict. The district did look at it. I think they said that it is potentially feasible. Since that point, notification to the residents, there's been some complaint, or not, say that they prefer not to have the driveway line up with Walsh Road. I met with a couple of residents this afternoon who are not able to attend tonight, and they did have some comment predominantly regarding a desire to shift the layout of the school to have access on the far side of Camino al Lago as opposed to access on access on Alameda de las Pulgas, which is a heavy arterial as opposed to a residential street. They did have some additional comment that I will add during the time of public comment, just so that you have that information as well.
All right. Gary, did you have some questions or comments?
Yes, actually, well, it was a comment, but it should actually be a question. The turnout appears to accommodate at one car, and it would seem to me that if the turnout were longer, then 3 cars could simultaneously load or unload. Unloading the throughput is much better when there are with 3, because there's no coordination needed for unloading. Obviously, loading requires coordination, but still, the throughput would be improved if the multiples could happen at once. And the turnout is really the thing that guides whether that happens or not. So it would seem to me to be better if there were a longer turnout. And so question is, what do you think about that?
So actually, because this is sort of a schematic, it's not super detailed. I believe you're referring to the turnout right at the drop-off location. Is that correct?
Correct, right below the entry plaza.
Okay, so that actually is a code-required accessible turnout. In addition to that turnout, we actually have 2 lanes of width. So we have the entire frontage of the school is drop-off. The additional lane is acceleration lane, so that if a car 3 cars back were to drop off their kid, they can pop out and accelerate and get out of the line.
And so what you're saying is that code mandates that it be that length and not longer.
Say again?
You're saying that code mandates that it be that length and no longer than that.
This is specifically just an accessible drop-off location. So code mandates you have 1 accessible location. So it is a pull out so that a person could actually get out of the car and use the curb ramps in accessible, and that they're not blocking traffic because they're going to take longer. So the full drop-off, that's basically at the end, the northernmost point we could do that was effective, and then we would still be dropping off and picking up just behind that to the south of that.
Other than the pedestrian walkway.
Correct.
So you're saying you expect that the drop-off pickup there is nothing to constrain you from doing having many doing it simultaneously.
Correct. The constraint is how fast the kids move.
Great. Pickup's trickier, but
yes.
Anyway, that's another conversation.
So
Okay, great.
Please.
Does the pedestrian walkway cut across the line for the drop-off cars?
Yeah, so if you notice the orange dots going across, It does, but it's we're going to put it on a speed table, so basically a raised crosswalk in our driveway.
Just a question about public outreach. The last time I was at a meeting, there was concern about public outreach.
Sure.
Just talk to me a little bit about how much. What have the neighbors seen of this, and when have they seen it?
They have not seen this. This is the first time it's been shown publicly.
This is fairly similar to what we saw in March, though.
No, in March, we were proposing a light aligned with Walsh Road, and we were proposing ingress and egress at Walsh Road. And the bus was completely isolated on Camino Lago, and cars are completely isolated on Alameda de las Pulgas. So our parking stalls and our overall parking plan is very similar, but the way we are circulating the cars through is different. We are to facilitate this, we're going to widen our sidewalk on Camino Lago that's well on the school side to facilitate both two lanes,
I'm
bus
sorry, I
and
didn't mean
cars.
to interrupt on that.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of more focused on what input the community or the
Yeah.
neighbors have had in this process.
So they have not seen this plan, and part of that's because this was utilizing our existing curb cuts, so it was not intended that it was going to need a lot of public input.
During ingress and egress hours, what points are staffed by school staff to
So,
regulate and control traffic?
We have a crossing guard at the crosswalk, the offset one that currently is 30, 40 yards in. We would move that crossing guard to the intersection of Alameda and Camino Lago, which would allow them actually to serve both directions. So that would be improved. And then at the pickup, we actually have a pretty extensive teacher system where we have teachers with bullhorns all the way along the pickup line, and cars have plate cards with the last name in the window. All the parents are trained, and so the teacher all the way at the corner sees that student Eric's parent is here, hollers on the bullhorn to the teacher up. They go to holler to the next one who's got the kids that are waiting, pulls them out so the kid's ready, so that by the time the car moves up, the kid is in the car and ready to go. So we actually run a very efficient pickup queue through there. The teachers are pretty adept at moving those kids in a hurry because they are playing with their friends and not paying attention necessarily. So we do pretty good at moving the traffic. The biggest challenge we currently have is that prior to school letting out, parents are there 15 minutes early waiting. And so because we have no on-campus queue, they completely block and shut down Camino Lago for that 15 minutes they're waiting. So that was part of this reworking it after the feedback. We had, with the entrance on Walsh, we had a long queue on campus, but we said, okay, how can we keep the benefit of that long queue, but not have the traffic signal that was problematic? So that was where we said, okay, we'll keep the same way we're coming in on Camino Lago, but we'll actually wind it all the way around. And we facilitate that by widening on the school property to make those lanes big enough for the bus and cars to pass.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
What happened with the traffic light at Marsh Road?
Walsh.
Sorry, Walsh.
We, based on the community feedback, we chose to no longer pursue that direction.
Because the community did not like the idea.
Yes.
Okay. I'm concerned about the safety of the current configuration regarding the left turn out onto Alameda de las Pulgas. The right turn lane is great and it's good that it's separated. The concern I have is that the way that people will when there's through traffic heading in the southbound direction, that traffic will hopefully be guided into the right lane. Since there's this middle lane in between, that is probably where people will jump out into while waiting for their opportunity to merge into traffic in the right lane. But that lane also serves as a left turn lane for Marsh. I mean Walsh. So sometimes when you have two directional turn lanes, those can be those can be hazardous. They exist all over the place, but typically in a not right after turning. So, do you have any thoughts?
Well, that was part of the reason why we were proposing the traffic signal to begin with. But after the feedback, we said, okay, what is the minimal intervention that we could do? Because the feedback was varied, and it was clear that it was not going to be easy to reach consensus of any direction, because there was also several people that were in favor of traffic signal. So it ran the gamut. But the left turn that we're showing onto Alameda is how we've currently been operating for the last 12 years. It's actually 12 years or more, but it's actually currently there's a left and right turn at that location. So by moving the right lane, the right turn further north, will actually be improving visibility at the minimum, because the cars won't be turning right next to the ones turning left. But that left turn would continue as it has currently been operating.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, when you got community feedback regarding a traffic light, did you explore an alternative of having a roundabout there?
There is not enough room there. We looked at that in the early review, and the engineer looked at the dimensions and said there was not enough room.
I see. Okay. In light of the fact that you have all of the property on one side of the road, did you consider, when evaluating that, a mini roundabout, and B, having the road alignment swerve slightly into your property to accommodate the size?
We actually did have a scheme that looked at that. The other challenge is that when we were proposing the traffic signal, that section of Alameda is extremely congested with utilities. And so it was we were really threading the needle to get out of the school. And so widening or having further roundabout type of things that would sort of take up part of our real estate. There's a fiber box from AT&T. There's a high voltage PG&E box. There's just a whole mess of utilities there. And so that was deemed unfeasible.
Yeah. Okay. I know if the city decides to make a change that the utilities have to bear the expense, but I don't know if the same is true for the school making such a change. Anyway, safety is critical. So, but you're saying that you haven't had serious accidents with left turns out of there as in the present arrangement.
We have not had any left turn accidents, and I'm double checking with my transportation engineer who looked at all the traffic accident studies.
Yeah, not coming out.
Not coming out. No. There have been accidents along Alameda, but not any coming out of the parking lot. How far back did that?
5 years.
In the past 5-year study.
Okay. Well, that's indicative of something. Thanks.
I'd like to hear from the police department. What's your experience? What do you observe at this location? Do you have any comments or recommendations?
So, Robert and I did meet with Eric a couple weeks ago, and we discussed this. Currently, the way it is now, every afternoon when the school is getting out, traffic is backed up eastbound of Camino Lago from the entrance to their queue area, sometimes all the way back to Alameda, and it completely blocks the road. You're unable to get through. When we looked at this plan, our recommendation at the time was to move their left-hand turn from its current location as depicted on the screen and align it with Walsh Road. And the reason was because cars turning left out of there are now entering a separation in the road where cars are going to be entering left there to turn left on the Walsh Road. Now we're going to have cars there trying to enter the southbound lanes of Alameda. Our recommendation was to move it to Walsh Road to avoid that, but also it's easier for oncoming drivers to navigate one intersection rather than multiple holes coming out of a parking lot for vehicles coming out. The traffic light idea appears not to be going forward. As far as safety-wise, that might be the best thing there, but it doesn't appear that the traffic light's going to go forward. So the alternative to that, in our opinion, would be to move that exit to align with Walsh Road. And then the school could reconfigure that exit area there to put in additional parking from where the exit is now to the new exit at Walsh Road.
Which, thank you for that. As I look at this, I wonder, even if the light is not feasible, or if we're not going to move forward with the light there, why isn't it aligned? Why isn't that considered a better configuration? Did you look at that in your engineering study? Or?
Sorry, ask your question again?
Well, even if you don't put a light at Walsh Road, is there a better alignment to put move the driveway so that it's directly across from the Walsh Alameda intersection?
So we thought that was the best alignment, actually. After the meeting, the engineer with Atherton that we were working with told us, "You're not going to get a light. Don't try it. You're not going to get the alignment." So we said, "Okay, we're done trying that." So that's why we're not pushing it. If it was aligned with Walsh, if you wanted us to align with Walsh, we would be happy to do so. We think that is the solution we were looking for before. But we are also fine with keeping it as it currently is.
Would you still, even without a light, then you think that's a favorable approach?
Yes.
Apparently there is a lot of resistance from residents for aligning it.
Which I think we may hear some. All right, any further comments, or?
I have one. I concur with what the sergeant said. It's difficult for me to support that left turn maneuver in that configuration. Our responsibility is to mitigate collisions, thereby mitigating injury. That seems like you're adding to it from a traffic enforcement standpoint, and it creates an enforcement issue for us as well. I would have very great difficulty supporting it.
All right. Well, if there's no further comments, I'd like to. I'm sorry.
I would say before you open it up to the floor, I do want to relay some of the information that I got from the residents.
Please.
So go ahead and open it up to public comment, but then I'll speak on
All right.
what I heard, and then the rest of the audience can.
All right.
Excuse me, would you identify who you are?
I am Robert Ovadia, the Public Works Director.
Oh, you were
For Atherton.
Stephen Tyler. Okay. Is that right?
Yeah, Stephen
Okay.
Tyler retired at the end of the year.
Okay.
And so the people that have been referred to as Atherton Town Engineers are under your,
I believe, well, there were some that were working on this prior to my starting with the town. And so I started with the town in February, right when they held their public meeting. So I was there when the school district had their public meeting at the school.
So since this has been going back 4 years, we've worked with David Wynn, who's in Atherton's, as one of their staff engineers. Stephen Tyler, who was the supervisor or superintendent for a long time, and who's retired. There was another engineer who left early in the process, Robert Kashawagi, Michael Kashawagi, sorry, and then Marty Henneman, who's currently an engineer for the city. So we've been working with them throughout, and then also have been meeting with George throughout as well on this process.
All right, thank you. I would just ask that we adhere to a 3-minute presentation. We don't have to be rigid about it, but I think there's a lot of people that want to be heard, and I'd like to hear from everybody and make sure everybody gets a chance. So if we could try to adhere to 3 minutes. Yes, ma'am?
Hi, my name is Amy.
Could you come to the podium, ma'am?
Okay, well, if you don't mind, I'd like to just relay the couple items
I'm
that I
sorry,
got from the...
pardon me, I misunderstood. Go ahead.
The couple that I met with unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, so I did tell them that I would speak on their behalf in terms of what their concerns were.
Right.
Part of it related to wanting increased dialogue with the school district regarding site layout and access. They had indicated that their thoughts on preferred access for parking would actually be on the backside of school property away from Alameda de las Pulgas, similar to most schools where they don't really have access on the major arterials. The second aspect was that they did not like the driveway aligned with Walsh. They did also suggest that if these driveways were going to remain, that they actually suggested that the left and right turn movements be flopped. And so rather than having the left turn crossing through the left turn pocket going to Walsh, that it be located on the north end of the property, and that the right turn movement come out on the south end. So it was just their thoughts on looking at it. I just said that I would relay these items. But one thing that was clear was their disappointment at the short notice and the request for additional dialogue with the school district, with the community. So.
Great, thank you. Ma'am? If you could just identify yourself and the neighborhood that you live in.
My name is Amy Delson. I'm a registered architect. I live on Walsh Road. My husband was unable to be here today, but we're kind of aligned in our desire for the alignment Walsh Road and where that left hand turn is going to be, because it's a basically engineering perspective, safer approach from those engineers that we have discussed it with, and our what we think is most important is safety, not so much history, but the safety that we know in modern traffic engineering. We also would like to see a traffic light at that intersection, and we understand it can be programmed such that it only kicks in at certain times of the day, or certain flows are happening, because there may not have been accidents coming from the school making those turns, but there certainly is from Walsh Road making left-hand turns onto Alameda. So I think that would be, I mean, I know several accidents, including in our own family, where my daughter's babysitter almost killed her. So, I mean, I feel very strongly that both for children crossing the street safely and for general traffic flow, that having a traffic light there would be great, and also having the alignment, because that's what's really expected, is to have streets aligning, so then you're alert and you're more likely to know that that's where the alignment is. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I'm Carolyn Beverstock, 354 Walsh. I'm right opposite Tallwood. The remarks from the representatives of the police department tonight were news. Those of us who live on Walsh Road first encountered what the school people have been doing by themselves for 4 years without consulting any of the people who would be affected by the ideas that they were planning. So that was a shock. And then tonight I come here and it turns out there's a recommendation on the part of the police department that is a different one. And yesterday I got today, many of us got an email today saying that you were meeting and that this group had essentially put onto this agenda, present the option of keeping the driveway in the current location and a new option with the driveway aligned with Walsh Road. And so I think the folks behind me will join me in saying, what are you up to if you're once again having a discussion about something that's a big deal to us, that seems not to be coordinated and with zip notice to us. So I'm against this alignment. I think it's just too complex a situation. The discussion that we had in March showed that we'd have kids supposedly crossing on both pedestrian crossing walks on either side of Walsh Road, and it just sounded to me at that time like safety wasn't going to be happening in that configuration. So I'm very much against the plan as we heard it in March. And hey, you know, other than the thing that Eric and his gang have gone ahead and they're doing the construction on this right now. You know, we were kind of calm that apparently this was over with, but your discussion tonight says it's not. So I think you need to put time into getting together all the people who need to be thinking about this with you, and not to be thinking about it independently, because there's been too much of that going on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, Officer Cookwood. Hi, looking on the phone. I'm Taya Henry Hamilton, resident of Tallwood Court. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I have been paying attention to this issue of traffic for at least 20 years. I'm an alumna of Las Lomitas when it was still a K-5 school, in fact. And some things have been mischaracterized, in my opinion. I absolutely dispute the assertion that there was outreach 4 years ago in any significant way to neighbors. I don't know which neighbors those were, but I don't know any of them. And I also dispute the characterization that there was ever a lot of enthusiasm for a light or an intersection at Walsh and Alameda. At the March meeting, what we kept asking was, why is there any entrance or exit on Alameda? And I think the Encinal example from earlier is really appropriate here, and they're perfectly analogous when you think about it. It would be like having entrances and exits on Middlefield for Encinal School, or on Santa Cruz for Hillview, or on Middlefield for MA. No one does that. The fact that Las Lomitas has been doing this and that it's been a problem for decades does not mean that it is right or logical or makes any sense at all. And tonight, the way I read this in an email was that there was basically a choice between terrible exit as it is now, or terrible in many other ways exit 50 feet to the north across from Walsh Road. And to me it looked like a proposal that was saying, well, the town says we should make the entrance opposite Walsh Road, but we're not going to do a light. Well, if you're going to do that, you have to have a light, because it would be so unsafe, someone would get killed, and then a light would have to happen, which is what they wanted from the start. So I feel like this is I feel like they have not listened to input at all. There is 600 feet of frontage on Alago. A lot of thought has gone into, the County Board of Supervisors blocked off Barney on a trial basis in 2000, and then adopted it permanently in 2001, and it's been very successful. So there's no vehicular traffic allowed on Barney. There's a raised crosswalk there. That is where pedestrians and bicyclists should be funneled through to get across to campus. There are existing bike racks there. But what I've been trying to figure out is and the school, representatives from the school have either blamed the county or Atherton at various points. And the lack of institutional memory in any consistent way for the last 20 years is extremely frustrating. And I've been on the phone for 2 days with people in various departments of the county, including Supervisor Horsley's office. I still can't find information on why a light wasn't proposed for Al Lago and Alameda and why it's mid-block. I don't think anyone is happy with the mid-block light. It's a hazard. I'm amazed no one has been killed yet. Because when the sun is shining in southbound drivers' eyes on the Alameda in the morning, they don't see it. And the fact, only by the grace of God has a pedestrian not been struck already. It's not where people expect a light to be, between Al Lago and Mills there on the Alameda. It makes no sense. And I don't have word, and I need to, and I thank you, Joyce, for giving me information about Mrs. Wamba, who's now in Portola Valley, because I think Leslie Wamba apparently spearheaded the effort to improve Alameda sometime between the mid-'80s and 2001 when that light went in. So there are now sidewalks there on Alameda. I cannot find evidence of anyone reaching out to the county to try to get sidewalks on the south side of Camino Al Lago, because that's terribly unsafe for pedestrians. It's just gravel, and cars do back up completely, and they swerve around. Everything you were describing about bad vehicular behavior at Encinal occurs every day during the year on Camino Al Lago. And I would like to just request that before anyone makes a decision on this, that members of the traffic committee spend some time there. I know via the white pages, which is now online, that 3 out of 5 people on the traffic committee live east of El Camino. The closest person on Mercedes Lane is still 1.9 miles from Las Lomitas. So I don't think that people on the committee are as familiar with this as we are on a daily basis. But I think you are familiar for sure with the issues on Middlefield Road, and it's perfectly analogous as far as I can see. Both of them have now become commute lanes that were never designed to handle that much traffic. They're both funneling to freeways, and commute times are insane. So Middlefield funneling through Marsh and Willow to 101, Alameda funneling through Woodside Road and Sandhill to 280. The speeding is a problem. The fact that there aren't safe sidewalks is a problem. It's insane to me to have any entrance and exit on the Alameda. The fact that it's expedient for the school does not mean that it's a good idea. And what's embarrassing for me is that our neighboring district, Menlo Park Atherton, whatever their problems are there at Encinal, they built an entirely new campus at Hillview from scratch without disrupting the school year, and managed to have their exit, you're rolling your eyes about disrupting the school year, they were able to be in the old buildings while they were building a new campus, which I have to say is a feat in itself. And they have traffic going on Elder, and the entrance to the school is on Elder. And there is a traffic signal, which I think is analogous. The Santa Cruz Elder signal, I think, is analogous to the need for Camino Al Lago, Alameda, real traffic signal. So I still don't have word on who wouldn't allow that to happen, because county blames Atherton, Atherton blames county, different people say it's someone else's fault, and there's no one who's been around for 20 years. So, it's extremely frustrating to me, and I just feel like for the last 20 years, and now there's 154 million in bond debt, which is twice what Menlo Park has, with half the number of students, that there still isn't an issue. And for the last 20 years, Las Lomitas has just been putting out fires, asking for more money, putting out their infrastructural fires that they themselves set. And that is absolutely maddening. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you. Ma'am?
Hi, my name is Yana Herring. I'm a resident of Camino Lago, and I want to mention a couple of things. I'll just show you on the map. So I live right here, and what we failed to mention earlier was that we have a staggered day, which means we have two drop-off in the mornings and 3 pickups in the afternoon. As residents of the street, what we get is hundreds of cars going through our street, blocking our driveways every day, 5-6 times a day, making K-turns in our driveways because they don't want to go through this whole circle. So what was proposed to us about a year ago, which I've only heard by asking, never have we gotten a letter or an email, but that's, you've heard that enough, what was proposed that all the traffic would kind of go through the new parking lot makes sense. What we see today is parents not only not wanting to do the small circle, but they're letting their kids off on Camino Lago. They're letting them run and cross the street by themselves. These are 5-year-old kindergartners that now need to cross 2 lanes of traffic and a parking lane, and now also having the buses go through there is a major safety issue for these students. You know, I think every house on our street has kids in the district. For us, it's dangerous to cross the street to take our kids to school, so let alone just letting a child out of the car. Now, it's illegal. People do it all the time. Everybody's in a rush. Our street is blocked 6 times a day for 15, 20 minutes, and people need to get to work, and that's what they do. They put their kids at risk. They put our kids at risk. And I do believe that we need to go back to the original plan with a traffic light. There is plenty of space right here. This is a huge parking lot to create an entrance from here, 2 lanes, an exit, a traffic light. It's not only going to be, obviously, as a resident, selfishly, I don't enjoy having my driveway blocked 5-6 times a day. It's not nice. But the other thing is that there's hundreds of kids going to the school. They're walking to school, they're being dropped off, and they're not safe the way it is today.
A traffic light at which location, ma'am?
Either one. If we decide that we're having one right here, then we funnel the traffic through it and we have it circle around. I'm a resident of the street. I don't mind a traffic light in Camino Lago. It would make my life a lot easier making a left turn. But if as long as we kind of kept it in a circular way, it makes more sense in my opinion. And I think it's safer. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, ma'am?
Yes, hello. Hi, my name's Deborah Blue. We also live on Camino Lago. And I found out about this meeting late last night, and I think because we don't live in Atherton, I just would like to say, I know my neighbors and we've heard nothing, so we feel super disappointed that in no way have we been part of this process. We didn't know there was a March meeting where, the light at Walsh Road was gonna happen and then it didn't. So I think it's incredibly unfortunate that because we're in the county, we've just been excluded from this entire process. Just following up what you said, we've been in our house 16 years, and I have seen so many children get dropped off, dodge across the street, run through the parked cars, through the traffic lane. Now they're gonna have buses there too. And it's true, people pull into my driveway to drop off their kids. They pull over, we got no parking signs on the side of our road one time. Parents still park there, open the door into the car lane, have their kid run across the street. Like, it's so dangerous. It just would break my heart if a child ended up hospitalized or killed because a few people on Walsh Road don't want to do the logical thing and have a stoplight here. I mean, it just makes sense the school has all this property, right? They acquired this extra residential lot. The whole kindergarten yard is going to be over here. The office is going to be here. It just makes, this to me is going to be a zoo. And, I just found out about this meeting at 10 o'clock last night. So, I'm not an engineer. I don't have, the right answer for this. But to tell me that cars are supposed to go through here, and then they can't even get out, they have to go here. Trust me, people are going to be dropping off their kids along the Alameda because they don't want to go through that one of the drop-off lane. And so now we're going to have cars and buses going down here, and the buses have to exit in front of the cars and in front of the children. I just don't see how that's safe. I don't see how it's going to work. I don't see how it's safe. It just, what I had heard a few years ago was the buses, they were going to trade it. The buses were going to come down Camino Lago and exit here. The cars would enter Walsh Road, do a huge loop through here, and then exit there. So you would have one point of exit, entrance and exit for all of the cars. And if you put a light here, you could have, you don't have to have the 2 curb cuts. It's like, thank you for the Atherton Police Department. I appreciate their, concerns about safety too, because it just doesn't make sense to have these 2 exits not aligned with cars here, when you can have all the cars either going left or right, where people would expect it, where there would be a stoplight. So, plus it would keep the car traffic over here, and then you don't have cars crossing in all the, the crosswalks here where the kids are walking to school and biking to school. So I'm just really concerned about the children. I mean, it's chaotic, and, somebody said you should come and see it. I wish you could. You're gonna have to wait until August 30th, because there's not a lot of traffic there in the summer. But I'm concerned about school safety, and I think we need to do what's right, you know, in terms of traffic engineering, and keeping those kids safe. I guess that's it. Let's keep the kids safe. Thank you.
Great, thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else that would like to speak, or?
May I make an addition to my comments?
Certainly,
Thanks.
certainly.
Okay, the other thing that, needs to be considered is that unlike lots of other streets, Walsh Road is not only the sole, exit for all the people who live up Walsh Road, but it's all the people who work up Walsh Road, and the enormous construction trucks. And when, at that March meeting, when we thought about the enormous construction trucks and trying to have children in the crosswalks sharing with those guys, you know, think of all of the accidents that have killed, among other things, bicyclists with these, you know, big construction vehicles. It just seems like that's another piece of this that just, I don't think they don't play well together, would be the way I would say that. Thanks.
Thank you. Sir?
Good evening, resident of Walsh Road. I'd just like to sort of reiterate some of the comments. Obviously, I think if there was more notice, people would probably be a little bit more collaborative. It kind of goes without saying. It's odd, especially if you have a 4-year process. I heard a lot of it from kind of one of the neighbors' representatives, Jamie. It's odd to have a 4-year process and then it feels like you're trying to sneak something in at the 11th hour. It seems wholly unnecessary. You have somebody that's been thinking about this for 20 years. Like, I would think some collaboration. I think she's got a lot of good ideas. I don't know her. I've never talked to her. This is just embarrassing. Like, this is what 4 years has produced. This is the grand plan. We can't do anything better than this. I mean, literally, it's a remodel. It's a patch job. Come on, we got. If I told my kids, so I have 4 kids. All of them have been through there. 2 of them are still in there. This is what we as a community came up with as a redesign to get our kids in and out while we're doing construction. It's just, come on, we can do a lot better. Let's use the resources you have. Take the time. I mean, you're basically saying, oh, we have a curb there already. Let's just use it and call it a day. The very first year my oldest was in kindergarten, I asked a question at her intro meeting, how in the world is there not light here? And you don't get a straight answer. The county in this. Why do we have a transportation committee if people can't work through that issue? I mean, it just boggles the mind that you don't have a light there and then you have that other, I don't know what that other light is. So I live on Walsh. I could go either way on the light. My wife probably doesn't want it. I'd be okay with it, but come up with something better, long term. Just look at the overall picture here, because this is a little embarrassing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to be heard? Any discussion after hearing comment? Has the council scheduled this for?
No, I don't think this is not yet in the council calendar. It will be, depending, there'll be a recommendation. Let me make sure I understand what exactly is in front of the Transportation Committee right now. Robert, what's the issue or what's the question?
Well, we received an encroachment permit application.
So it's an encroachment permit application.
And so prior to acting on that encroachment permit, we wanted to come to bring the school district to talk to the community as well as the Transportation Commission or committee as to what they were proposing, because knowing the community's interest, we didn't want to act on the permit without having additional outreach. We had expected that the notice go out sooner than it did by the school district, We met with them, I think, on June 25th and asked them to send out that notice as we were putting it on the Transportation Committee calendar. And so you do have less people in the audience than you would have had they been able to schedule it a little better. And so our discretion is really, again, limited to stuff in the right-of-way. One thing that one of the residents did bring up that I got copied on an email from the county was that Las Lomitas did approach the county about relocating the mid-block crossing signal to be on Camino al Lago. We did not get that directly from the school district. But we did get notice from the county. What they did say was that it was something that they would consider, provided that there was a traffic study that justified it, that they'd understand the timing counts on it, and that the town would participate in maintenance costs. But again, nothing formal has been brought to us to consider. And again, if that were to come forward, we'd again bring it through the process.
When did you receive the encroachment permit request?
We received it, I think, early to mid-June. We did a review. We met with the district with some preliminary comments. Some of those it looks like they were addressing in terms of the intersection safety and providing better crossings at the Camino al Lago intersection. And like I said, we had asked them to take a look at whether or not the exit would work at Walsh to better align it with that. They were looking for feedback before they move forward with either direction.
So I have two questions. What's the next step in the process? And the other question
From
is,
staff's perspective?
yeah, I mean, how does this permit get denied or approved? What's the next step in the process?
Well, we would either act on or deny the application that we received. And so that can be done in a couple of different ways. We can approve some of the improvements at the intersection so that those move forward. The thing that the committee should understand is that those driveways are existing. And so they may not modify public right-of-way, which would require the encroachment permit. Their use of that parking lot could theoretically just use those existing driveways unless the driveway permits that they've had for a number of years were revoked.
So when you say step out, from the staff's perspective, would staff be required or expected to go to council on this?
For most encroachment permits, we would not, but we can certainly, with the recommendation of the Transportation Committee, have it brought forward. The next council meeting, unless there's a special meeting, wouldn't be till after school started. I mean, there's a council meeting on the 18th, I believe.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah, and so there's not enough time. I guess we could try and rush an agenda item to get it on the calendar. Other than that, unless there's a special meeting called, council will be dark in August, and then.
So, but what's the relevance? Would this otherwise be ready to go by August 30th?
We planned to proceed with not changing the curb cut, that's the controversial one, which, based on on Robert's comments a minute ago, that wouldn't actually needed anything. So we went ahead and demoed that because the only things that needed permission is realigning the crosswalks and some of the sort of periphery things that were relatively minor and that in our previous conversations were not controversial. So we did not anticipate any issues with that. It's similar to when you start a construction project, you need an encroachment permit to connect the sewer line. You don't anticipate that needing further approval. So we demolished demolished parking lot and are proceeding with construction. Our schedule, we've stopped for a week on the parking lot because of the meeting we had to assess if we could even shift or whatnot. But our plan was paint was gonna be drying on those parking stripes when school opened. So we are dangerously out of time to make a change. Our position is we will proceed with the existing curb cut on Alameda, and we are fine with that.
So I have to ask, the encroachment permit precisely was to do what? How does that alter what is there now?
The encroachment permit, if I recall, had the removal and replacement of those driveways.
The driveway onto
The
Las
two
Palmas?
existing locations.
So both?
Repaving.
Repaving.
At the same
At the
existing
same, at the
cuts
same
and-
locations. Additionally, there was some pedestrian improvements at the Camino al Lago intersection. I believe, if I recall correctly, an exit gate for the buses onto Camino al Lago.
Yes, widening that, and it's currently an exit, making it a little bit wider to let the bus exit from Camino Lago,
So
and installing a gate there.
Is that what made the encroachment permit necessary?
Then, well, if we ever
Excuse
pave
me,
the
sir,
public
can we
right
get
of
the
way,
city to answer that question? Because it's a city
Yeah.
question.
So the encroachment permit is working in city right of way, city property. And so that's the authority that we have jurisdiction over, is our property, or the street rights of way. And so when somebody proposes to do work on those rights of way, our process is that they apply for an encroachment permit, staff reviews it, and typically, most of the things are ministerially approved.
So, but the trigger is the driveways need to be made wider to accommodate bus turns.
Or rebuilt. For example, I'll give you an example. That driveway on the north end was a residential driveway. If they wanted to rebuild it to be sturdier to accommodate additional traffic, make it deep, thicker, etc.,
Right.
because they're working in the right of way, they would need an encroachment permit.
Right.
So.
So okay, I'm clear on that.
Yeah, I had a second question, was
Yes.
about the lights on our Lago. What is the process, or what's the next step to get a formal assessment launched?
Well, that formal request is something that, if the school district were to desire to move forward with that, they would complete their traffic analysis regarding that. It would be something that's presented to both the town and the county, because the intersection is split between the two jurisdictions. In addition to the encroachment permit that would have to be issued for installation of signal poles and other things within the right-of-way, they would get one from the county, one from us. But if we were going to number one, approve that signal, that's something that we would bring forward to both the Transportation Committee and the council. And the council would have to act on any sort of agreement for maintenance costs. So it's not something that we would just approve ministerially.
Do you have a motion?
Yes,
Sherman?
motion to put it to council.
All right. Any discussion on that point? So the proposal would be, we would recommend to the council that rather than just administratively consider the encroachment permit, that the council is there a provision to do that?
Yeah.
All right.
My question, I want to make sure we understand before we do it, and I know I'm not on the committee, but I'm concerned that we don't know what the consequences of that would be. And I don't like, being backed into a corner, but what would the consequences of that be because the council is not likely to act on it until September at the earliest, actually. in this
Okay.
case.
So the couple of consequences would be that the crossing improvements at Camino al Lago wouldn't happen. We could approve those items, because I think that would be a good thing to do regardless of what happens with the driveways. The other aspect is if those driveways are currently in place, the odds are that the school district would pay to use them. would pave their parking lot to utilize existing driveways. And so they just wouldn't rebuild them. They would just likely connect to them.
And that could be done without an encroachment.
If they're not doing, for work in the public right-of-way, they would need a permit. And so if they were to do that paving work up to the right-of-way, that's something that's covered under DSA.
So to paraphrase you, they'd be able to go ahead with this plan regardless of whether you get the permit or not?
Portions of it. There may be bits and pieces that they wouldn't be able to implement, fixing curbs and things like that.
Well, the bus exit would be a problem. Right,
The bus exit
be
would
a problem.
require an encroachment permit on Camino al Lago.
You know, I'm curious, a question for Mr. Holm. Were there, what community outreach, what was a community outreach program under the contract with the district, school district?
There was numerous different types of community outreach. You know, there's several communities that use this school. So there was a neighbor group of neighbors immediately across the street that was self-created that came to us at the start of this, and they coordinated their immediate neighbors.
Wait, she's across the street. She doesn't remember any of that.
No idea who you're talking about.
Christy Goff and Heather Hopkins, and there's a handful of others.
Okay, well, I wasn't part of that, and they live on the other side of Canal.
Perhaps if we could allow them to continue, then if anyone wants to speak, we can.
So there was that group. There has been presentation on this in every board meeting for the last 4 years. So at whatever point it was developed, I've given presentations. I come to PTA once a year. I've given a foundation presentation, our school foundation, which is parents. There was a county safety traffic corridor meeting held at Los Alamitas in November of 2015 where we presented this. That was coordinated by Supervisor Horsley and Menlo Park Councilmember Ray Mueller. I've presented to the Rotary Club. We've sent a community mailer about our overall construction, not specifically the traffic changes. We had a community meeting that we had advertised, had an article written about in the Almanac about the meeting to try to get people there and post it on Nextdoor to try to get people to come in September of last year. There's been, I think, 2 articles about it in the Almanac about our plans for construction. And we had talked prior to the meeting at Walsh Road, we had talked to about 5% of the residents in Walsh Road, and they had all unanimously said they were in favor of the traffic light. So we just got lucky or unlucky in picking in the residents that we did talk to had said they were in favor of it. And so that's part of why we wholeheartedly appreciate and understand the frustration of the neighbors that are not in favor of the light, that feel like we bamboozled them or was not reaching out to them. We thought, based on all of the conversations we'd had, that it was a sure thing. We also had presented it to Atherton City Council last summer as a periphery to another item that we were working on with them. We actually presented it in 2 city council meetings. And at the time, all 5 city council members were supportive of it, but wanted more public outreach. So we, in reaching out to the Walsh Road residents, instead of the usual perimeter that you do around, we actually made it a point to reach every Walsh Road resident, because Walsh Road is a long road and it's this unique thing. So in reaching the Walsh Road residents, you know, some of them are a mile away from the school, which you normally would not be notifying them of something like that, but we actually made a point of notifying them. We did not go back at that meeting. We did not go to the Camino al Lago residents, because we specifically were targeting the Atherton residents that were going to be affected by the traffic light that didn't know about it. And I had already talked to Camino al Lago residents about the plan to do the traffic light. Now, if we had anticipated there was a lot of opposition, we probably would have called everybody that we talked to that was neighbors that had said they were in favor and said, come and voice your support. Because at the start of the meeting, I did ask for a show of hands, saying how many are in favor and how many are opposed. And it was about 50-50. I meant to do that at the end of the meeting. This is the March meeting. Many people had left, but I forgot to because I was still fielding questions. So we feel that we did a lot of community outreach. There's a lot of different community groups that use it, and so we were regretful that we did not hear the feedback until late in the game, and so that's why we reassessed. We paused for a second, reassessed, but our construction project is ongoing. And when we came up with an alternate solution that we are bringing here tonight, the approach was that this is an administrative solution that wouldn't have required coming to the Traffic Commission, wouldn't have required going to council. And I think the main reason that we are here tonight is because Atherton staff actually felt that the alignment with Walsh Road was still a good thing to explore and wanted to bring it here for feedback. So we had stopped that notion and said we're going to just go forward with what we have and try to make it better and make really minor changes. And that was our approach.
I have to point out something, because you mentioned a specific meeting. This is November 2nd, 2015.
Yes.
And I can refer you to the Almanac archive on this, because I've been going through Almanac archives for days to try to find out why we didn't know about this. That wasn't Las Lomitas' gig. It happened at Conno Hall, but it was instigated by residents on Altshul near Ashton and Gordon because of accidents and pedestrians being hit by cars from Las Lomitas district parents on their way to La Entrada or on their way down to Las Lomitas. There were a lot of people involved, including Don Horsley, our supervisor for District 3. I spoke with someone in his office today to try to find out more about that meeting, and she said she would ask and get back to me because it wasn't clear to her what was accomplished at that meeting other than letting both Sheriff, Menlo Park Police, Menlo Park Transportation, and San Mateo County Public Works know how concerned parents were in the area about vehicular traffic and the danger and accidents that were happening. The people who've really involved the county are the people in that unincorporated triangle between Sharon, Alameda, and Santa Cruz. And I just, for the record, if anyone wants to see what a really good example of, a community organizing, they're even trying to become incorporated into Menlo Park, and it's called universitypark.org. If you go and look, univpark.org, and they've done a ton of work and traffic studies, and apparently Super Horsley's office is very much involved in making that area safer, whether it means doing sidewalks on the part of Sharon that is badly paved because it's in the county. I mean, to me, it shows that the county is definitely open to improving safety when an organization reaches out to them. And what I have not been able to discern in the last 2 days of combing internet archives and making phone calls to people and in supervisors' offices, I even spoke with someone in Rich Gordon's office because Horsley's only been our supervisor for the last 6 years. Again, institutional memory, big problem, is that they have not been reached out to in the past by Las Lomitas, and this has been an ongoing problem. And to have this ongoing problem then suddenly say, yeah, you all have been suffering because of our poor planning for 20 years, but gosh, the kids are coming August 30th, so let's get this done. And I don't think that's a good way to do business.
All right, thank you. Just a question for staff. What kind of analysis do you perform when you get these encroachment permit requests?
I'm going to say that the answer, I'm going to say depends. I mean, most of our requests comply with our city standards, and that's where our predominant review is what they're doing complying with city standards in terms of the actual construction, making sure that the way that the work is done is going to be done in a safe manner, and that the outcome of what is done is per the approved plan.
All right.
And so understanding the interests of the community before we went ahead and approved something, we did want to make sure that there was more to it than just reviewing this meet standard.
I can just let you know, I was at that March meeting, and there is great interest in the community. That's why I was asking about outreach, and I don't think Mr. Homer is really surprised that there's still great interest. I'm a little disappointed there wasn't more outreach from getting now, because this is entirely predictable.
You know, and I'll express where I'm at on this. You know, we've heard concerns about, you know, the safety. I have my own concerns about the alignment, dropping traffic in between two intersections, especially making a left across Las Pulgas, even if there's a two-way, you know, left turn lane there. I think there's still a lot of potential conflicts there. I know there's been a lot of work that's, you know, expended on this by the school district, but I am concerned about the amount and type of outreach that has occurred on this. We have a motion to recommend to the council that the council take final approval for the encroachment permit, and I support that motion. I don't know if there's any other discussion. Or, no.
Does that mean you're seconding the motion for a vote, or what's happening?
Well, I want to hear any discussion on it before we do take a vote.
I don't think I have anything to add. It does seem like it's getting zoomed along, and stoplight somewhere seems like the best long-term solution. To get to that would be, I mean, I guess I'd like that to go with our recommendation or with our comment that the council consider something.
Just a moment, please. Gary, are you still with us? Perhaps he's dropped off.
Procedurally, I don't know how this works. Independent of whether or not Las Lomitas petitions the county for an Alameda stoplight, is it conceivable that the traffic committee working with the city council can initiate, I don't know, a request or a study to have that light?
It would be up to the city council to direct us to consider any proposal like that. So I'm ready to take a vote. All those in favor of the motion to recommend to the council that it assumes responsibility for encroachment permit approval?
Aye.
Aye? Okay, aye. So that's our recommendation there. All right. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and sharing your views with us. So, you're welcome to stay if you wish.
Just send out your invitations a little earlier.
When this comes up before the council, it'll just be on I don't know how we'll word out, but it'll be agendized 2 weeks in advance.
2 weeks?
I think it's 2 weeks. We got an agenda for the next meeting, which is the 18th. That's for that agenda.
Also put up on the website.
Pardon? Oh, the formal agenda only gets posted 5 days in advance then. Okay.
But also put up on the website.
Hello?
Mr. Louder, are you
That's
there?
Gary? Gary's on.
I am here.
Okay, I think we lost you at some point.
Yeah, thank you.
Gary, just to bring you up to date, we passed a motion to recommend to the council that they assume responsibility for approving the encroachment permit request from the school district.
Yeah, I voted in favor of that also.
Okay, very good.
But I would say, though, that the fact that there are so many people who stated they were blindsided is something worthy of note, and so I think that there are places, and like there's the Athertonian email list, and there are a number of ways in which people could get notices. There could, there could be a sign placed along the side of the road in the relevant area. There are ways that we could provide public notice of such discussions, such that this type of thing wouldn't happen. And I think also another issue this raises is the traffic light was unpopular, but that doesn't mean it wasn't the best solution. Any change typically will face opposition. So
I'm sure the council will weigh in. They'll discuss that if they choose to take authority for the encroachment permit approval.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Moving on to the next item, approval of active transportation program grant application.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'm Robert Obadia, Public Works Director. An opportunity has arisen to obtain or to apply for an active transportation program grant. This is a program that is, or a call for projects has been issued by the state. It's due the end of July. The predominant call is related to, as it says, active transportation. So biking, encouraging pedestrian and other mobility other than vehicles. So when this opportunity came up, we were looking at our bicycle and pedestrian master plan as to areas of needed improvement. Following that, the San Mateo County City-County Association of Governments offered up some limited grant writing assistance. And so we applied for that and were awarded a nominal amount of consultant support for applying for the Atherton Avenue bikeway improvements. We have also contracted for some outside assistance through Interwest to help us put the grant application together. There was a feasibility study done a few years ago looking at Atherton Avenue. And so what we have up on the screen is the existing section of Atherton Avenue. The roadway itself is about 24 feet wide that's paved. On the two sides there are some graded ditches, and in some places it's actually an improved concrete ditch. What we're proposing to do is to widen the pavement by approximately 3 feet or so on each side, narrow the travel lanes from 12 feet down to 11 feet, and provide a 4-foot bike lane on the roadway, and then doing some shoulder grading on the two sides.
A process question, I apologize. I don't know if this applies to committees or not, but I think Gary may live close enough to this where if he were on the city council, he would not be able to vote on it. Does that apply to the committee?
Typically, I guess that would be the case, 500 feet.
So yes, it would. So does Gary live within 500? Is this all the way down the
This is the stretch. Basically, we're looking from Alameda de los Pulgas, likely down to the curve and maybe past the curve, because the bike lanes won't. The S-turn on Alameda. Yeah, and so we're still doing some analysis as to whether or not we can sweep it around the curve and take it down to Odell or not. There's not enough right-of-way as we get to El Camino to put it in.
Okay. And Gary, are you still on, Gary?
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like that's within 500 feet of your house. I'm not sure. I'm making that guess.
It is.
I'm just trying to protect you ethically on this. If you're
well, yeah. Look, this is it's easy for me to recuse myself from the vote, but there's no purpose in recusing myself from the discussion.
Absolutely, that's correct.
And so, just as a point of clarity, the original plan in the original concept in the bike and pedestrian master plan also considers pedestrian access. But what is shown in there is about a 3-foot graded shoulder on the sides before the ditch, which is not ADA compliant. And so we can't put that in the application because it wouldn't be approved. So what we're looking at this point is solely providing the bicycle facilities along Atherton Avenue. The grant applications are due July 30th. We went to the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and they approved of the application. What we're doing is, again, getting approval, seeking your approval from the Transportation Committee to help bolster our application, that we had some additional public outreach regarding the project.
Any discussion?
Can you reiterate where it starts and ends? I just didn't.
Okay,
quite
so as we put it forward to CCAG, the ideal limits would be from El Camino to Alameda.
Oh, yeah.
The right-of-way at both ends is constrained. It's a little more constrained, I believe, at the El Camino side, where the right turn lane is kind of like really scrunched in there and really short. We're not able to acquire right-of-way at this point in time, and so we're looking at currently our consultants are analyzing where an appropriate stopping point for the project is, and it'll either be somewhere near Odell, which is close to El Camino, or on the other side of the S-turn, just because that turn is a little tight. So it'll either be from there up, I'm going to say, almost all the way to Alameda, where it'll end before the pork chop and allow for transitioning back to the Class 3 that it currently is.
Thank you.
So I'm seeing that with the proposal, you're taking a foot extra with the proposed section.
We're reducing the travel lanes from 12 feet down to 11.
What I was seeing was that, so you currently have 24 plus 12, 36 feet.
Currently have 24. Well, there's a variable area on the sides. I'm going to say it's really variable what's on the side. Some areas have like a 2-foot concrete swale. Others, it goes to a graded ditch, which is a little wider. And obviously all of the driveways tee into the street.
Right. I'm not sure if I was making myself clear. My question was that, so in the current situation you have, in this
picture
drawing that you've given us, we've got 36 feet that are being used up for traffic and varies, right?
Yeah, well, the varies is that 6 feet kind of
so it's not necessarily 6 feet.
It just
okay, I get you.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it was turning out to be 37 feet in the proposed section, so I was just curious.
Yeah, so the paving would widen each side by about 3 feet. We would do some variable grading on the sides to make sure that everything matched in, and we continued the drainage as best as we can. And there would be obviously the driveways that come in, we'd have to reconnect up to the widened pavement.
You know, a question, I believe Atherton is posted at 35 miles an hour there? 30 through there. Would the reduction in lane width trigger a reduction in speed to 25?
It would have, the justification for a speed reduction would follow a engineering and traffic survey. And so I think that, is that one of the ones
Is
that
lane
was-
width a component in that?
Well, the real component is how fast are people driving. And so the way that the speeds are set are based
No,
on...
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I'm
so
familiar with that, but I thought there was an engineering aspect to that as well.
Yeah, so what happens typically is when you take a wide, people feel more comfortable driving faster on wider lanes. And so as you narrow the travel lane, people, their peripheral vision suddenly say, well, I might need to drive a little slower. And so the end result down the line after this is done is that we could do another traffic, we have to do traffic surveys periodically in terms of judging what that speed is. So down the line, it may ultimately reduce the speed.
I would ask the police department, is speed on Atherton an issue?
Every now and then you'll get a speeder out there, you'll get a few speeders. I've sat out there before patrol and, you know, a few cars will hit 40, maybe a couple miles over 40, but overall, when they went to the roadway, I'd say it's not a big issue.
Okay, thank you. All right, then you're,
Just seeking your support.
all right. Have a motion?
Yes, motion.
Second.
To support.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the resolution. Sorry.
It is to voice our support in support of the
Application.
grant application.
Yeah, can I just ask a couple of questions about it first? I didn't know that discussion was ending. My question is about the shoulder and graded ditch. Is the idea that the ditch would carry water to the nearest storm drain, or would the ditch itself diffuse water into the ground?
It would be similar to what's out there now, and so there aren't many storm drains along that route. I believe that there are some inlets. We would try and grade that ditch, but I think that there are significant stretches that are very flat, and so to answer your question, it's probably a combination of both. In those areas that are flat, things will pond pretty much like they do now, but we do what we can to convey. But part of that is also trying to minimize the impacts of the improvements that are out there as well.
Okay, what does this mean for parking along the side of Atherton?
The area available for parking will likely be reduced.
Well, the width is reduced, but I mean, firstly, is it legal to cross the bike lane?
Is it legal to park for parking?
Cross the line, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So I guess the question is whether parking would be viable. I mean, sorry, is it legal to park in such a way that the car would intrude into the bike lane?
No.
And so whether parking along there would be acceptable or not. Basically there would be a loss of parking space in front. So, I guess a question is, to what extent have we asked the residents?
We have not yet. Other than the outreach that was done with the development of the bike and pedestrian master plan, which I believe had a significant outreach, and the need for, or the desire for the bike lanes, it has been approved by the council when they adopted the bike and pedestrian master plan.
Well, that's all great,
let me add this, is that what we're talking about at this point is a grant application. We are going to submit it. The competition initially is statewide. Following that, there's a regional component if it doesn't get approved by the state. The main outreach component would happen after we get some sort of authorization to move forward with the project. And so right now we don't have a project that we can really tell residents what the impacts would or wouldn't be on their individual properties.
Can you give a rough estimate of what this is going to cost to do, and how much how large are the grants that they give out?
I believe that the estimate that was put together as part of the Bike and Ped Master Plan was somewhere around 2 million or so, maybe a little more. Construction costs might have gone up, but we're taking out the pedestrian component. And we would be seeking a grant of probably a 70 to 80% match. So meaning that we would seek about, we would be putting forward about 30% of the project cost.
And the
but we're still working on finalizing estimates and putting the grant application together, and we'll have to be looking at what the scoring aspects would be to make our grant competitive.
So I don't know whether it costs a lot or little to do a grant application, and I don't know if it costs a lot or little to ask the neighbors and the people affected by it how they feel about it. But if it costs a lot to make a grant application and a little to ask the neighborhood, it would seem you should ask the neighborhood first, or vice versa, depending on what's involved. But the trade-off of parking seems material, and it's a question that ought to be put to the affected parties, because there is often parking along there, and if that is going to be taken away, then it should be a conscious choice.
Okay.
I say, noted, Gary. I think if we're successful in securing the grant, that should be a part of that process, and I'm sure it would be.
Great.
All right, thank you. Approval of speed feedback sign locations. Bob?
Yeah.
Wait, for the sake of that vote, I should be put down as abstain due to my conflict.
Okay, we'll mark you down as abstained.
Okay, so Anthony's pulling it up on the screen. You have before you some proposed locations for speed feedback signs. Last year's capital budget included money to install 3 speed feedback signs. Staff brought this item to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for their feedback in terms of locations that would be good to put those speed feedback signs. The areas that they have suggested and approved are location number 1 is southbound Elena Avenue between Park and Valparaiso. The second location is somewhere on Atherton Avenue westbound between Austin and Selby. And the third location is on Middlefield southbound, somewhere between the Redwood city limit, which is just north of Jennings, to Marsh Road. And they were leaving the exact location to determination of the police department as to where they might be best located. And then before putting these things in, we wanted to bring it forward to the Transportation Committee for feedback and approval.
Here's a question. Why is the Bike and Ped Committee? You said Bike and Ped looked at this? Why are they taking the site?
Typically, these speed feedback signs are partially installed to improve safety for the bicyclists, to slow down traffic, advise them of their speeds, so that it's safer for the bicyclists.
But you just said, okay. Partially, if they're deciding, it's actually that's the dominant factor. If they're getting input, then it's a partial factor. I guess that's my.
Well, the final approval comes through the Transportation Committee. Their recommendation
But if we were to move it, then they would get input, right? So it's all. Yeah. Okay.
I will say that there, in this current year's budget, I think there's 2 more that have been approved, and so staff is open to receive input on additional locations. And
I guess my overarching process point would just be, we should decide first whether it really is geared to bikes and peds, in which case that makes sense, or if it's geared towards traffic, I would think it would come here first and they get input or something like that.
Yeah, perhaps we could, if there's two more under consideration, perhaps we could review it first and then seek their concurrence.
Or staff could make, whatever, it's just, it seems when you go to the bike and ped, you're gonna get really bike and ped, like I am looking at this one in Elena, and I don't think that's probably a big issue for cars, meaning car to car, as opposed to bike and ped, that's obviously a big issue because they got schools right there. Yeah.
So one of the recommendations that, so these pedestrian signs, or not pedestrian, these vehicle signs were actually requested by the BPAC, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and they were placed under the Public Works budget, and the budget was approved to purchase 3 this year, 2 next year, and I think there's an additional 2 the following year. They had also requested a movable message board, which got denied because of the parcel tax vote, so that got denied. When I went to, I don't know if I did it at a meeting or spoke with David Nguyen about it, my suggestion was if they were going to recommend buying these signs, that they place them on streets that had sharrows already installed. As part of the BPAC, since you have the sharrows, if you're going to get signs, let's put them on the streets with the sharrows already in place.
It really is aimed at bikes and pedestrians, that's the point. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the point. And I think the streets that they're asking for, you know, the bike traffic, they are using the entire road. And I think that's why they chose these locations. So that's what they've recommended.
So, yeah, you're looking for our support.
Yeah, and Chair, the Chair is the liaison with Bike and Ped.
And I attended that meeting and heard the discussion and was heard on a couple of points. So, yeah, any discussion on these locations?
I don't know, the one on Elena, that's a very short distance, but I don't have any knowledge to say it's not worth it. So
I would actually myself, I would actually recommend that one
the most.
be northbound
Oh.
rather than southbound.
Really?
At the same location?
Yeah.
Across the street possibly.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because you're almost to the point where you're stopped. I mean, either way, they're probably going fast. I don't know.
Is
I
that
don't have
far enough north of Valparaiso that they could accelerate? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that couple.
But it's also, that you said earlier in the meeting, you didn't think that Atherton Ave was a big issue for speeding, and now we pick it as one of the 3 top priorities for a fixed speed radar sign. You know, that's striking.
Because that was picked by Mike and
You mentioned 2 other radar speed signs. Have they been purchased or are they in a budget?
No, these haven't been purchased yet. They were approved in last year's budget. There are 2 more that are approved in the current 18-19 budget.
And
And so,
2 more in 1920.
well, that's not approved yet. It's proposed, but it's not approved by the council. But the council adopted a budget that will accommodate 2 additional signs for the now current fiscal year.
You know, I didn't say it at the Bike and Ped Committee meeting, but I'll say it now. I'm more comfortable with staff working with the police department to make these calls. You know, they know the dynamic conditions out there and where they're going to have the greatest impact. And I don't know that, you know, I feel confident enough in knowing what those conditions are to really make to have relevant or valuable input. Again, I feel more comfortable
I concur.
with staff.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if it would be helpful, this can certainly be deferred to your next meeting, and then at that point in time, we can come back with if there's any sort of accident history in these areas, and if there's been any citation history for speeding.
I think it'd be very helpful.
Yeah, well, especially when you said I'd have it on the other side of the street.
Yeah, so
I mean,
and
it seems like
again,
it would be worth justifying that.
I think we can take a strategic look at it, even different data points.
yeah, I'd appreciate, you know, where do you think they should be?
One of the things I'd ask is what's the purpose of them? Because if it's to protect, you know, bicyclists, pedestrians, that's one purpose, and that would lead to certain locations.
If it was to remind drivers to slow down, that would be, I assume, a different purpose, so probably lead to different locations.
I mean, I feel that's how it works on James in my neighborhood. It reminds people to slow down. I don't know if it makes it any safer or not. But.
All right, so we'll
Yeah.
look for your input at our next meeting. You know, our next item is the staff reports police traffic unit, and given the hour and our chief's extraordinary ability to summarize and
In 4 seconds or less.
communicate concepts effectively, I would ask, if there are no objections, to hearing a broad summary of trends.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, because we are looking at 6 months worth of traffic data reports, and we normally do go through those in detail, but I can tell you, in looking at those, we look at them and do an analysis monthly. We see no anomalies, this period of time, year to date, last year. Probably similar levels of citizen complaints, traffic complaints, nothing unusual. Traffic pictures, similar, but we've had no fatalities again, we've had no real serious injuries except for the one car tree that stands out. What does stand out is our DUI enforcement for 6 months. It's far exceeding last year's first 6 months, and so we expect to see an increase every year in emphasis. But overall, the officers are working extremely hard proactively during the right times of day and the right locations. Traffic is our number one complaint in town as it relates to schools. So I think overall we're in good shape. I don't see any analysis or any areas of concern. And again, we're constantly looking at these every month with the commander and the traffic center.
Any comments or questions?
Thank
But
you.
if you do find time to review those in detail and have questions, please contact me.
Very good.
I can't say I heard what was said. I think we should resolve to fix the audio conferencing problem. I have offered to donate something that works, and this present one really doesn't.
Didn't you hear we approved roundabout?
Where are the monthly reports?
Online.
Where are they?
Yeah.
On the website.
They were
On
in
the
the
website.
the announcement email that we received as well.
Oh,
They're
But each month when you get the email, you get the packets and have
Okay.
the information.
okay.
so that is available. All right, our next meeting is scheduled for notably September 11th.
Wait, can I just intercede one quick thing? Regarding the Atherton Avenue bike lane thing, is it possible that when we set this up, that we can sort of agree, change the rule? I don't know if this is state law or and not therefore not changeable or not, but the times that people have events that require parking along the street are very rare, and they tend not to be at the times that people bike. I do bike down Atherton Avenue, and so I look forward to there being bike lanes. But if that means that in a lot of places people can no longer park, it's a major trade-off, but it's an odd trade-off in light of the fact that the cars are at times. Anyway, point is, can we say, can we make it such that if people park and they stick into the bike lane, it's okay, because bikers generally, there's not so much traffic that going around to park cars is a major hazard, compared to what it is today, where you're always at risk. So this is a legal question for the police. Any
So
opinion?
if I understand, Gary, is there a provision that would allow, either through posting or notice, that would allow parking that encroaches on a bike lane?
Yeah, I mean,
Does that
well,
capture
whether posting would be needed is a separate question. But the simple thing is that when people have parties sufficiently rarely, but it happens from time to time, and it's just to me as a biker, it's not a big deal to go around 200 feet of parked cars into the traffic lane, because they're still adequately wide. So I just think that we'll get more pushback from residents if it means no, they can't park there. But if we have control over the laws or their enforcement such that we can say no, it's okay, or no, it's okay as long as you submit this temporary permit application, then it would be less of a trade-off or less of a sacrifice for people to accept it.
Sure. You know, I see Chief McCauley taking notes, and we can ask him to, you know, let us know at the next meeting, you know, is there some provision that would enable people to park on Atherton if there was a bike lane?
Yeah, and we're only really talking about situations where the landscaping sticks out such that there isn't enough room to pull fully off the new wider road.
Okay, I think we'll put that on the agenda for next meeting, and look for some insight from the chief.
Great.
All right. If there's nothing else, we'll meet again on September 11th, and we're in adjournment. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
This was usually long.
Oh, yeah, no, I realized that.
I just write my name.
It's quite interesting.
Yeah? Yeah, it was.
Actually.
Thank you, sir. All that.
It was unusual for us to get this many members.
I'll send you the link.
No, I thought it was interesting, actually.
I hope.
I'll see you one more meeting before I do this. Thank you. Gonna run for reelection.
Good night, sir.
Would
Good
love,
to see you.
if you're willing to,
Likewise.
enter your name as an endorsement. There'll be 3 candidates.
If you'd like me to, I'd be more than happy, having come